You know that feeling, that absolute pit in your stomach when you look at your phone at like 10:00 p.m.
Oh, yeah.
You're scrolling, maybe doom scrolling a little bit, and you see a post from an advocacy group you follow, and the graphic is bright red. It's got all caps text.
Urgent emergency.
Exactly. Action needed now. If you don't send an email in the next 5 minutes, this bill is going to die. And even if you're tired, even if you don't fully understand the bill, you feel this immediate spike of cortisol. You feel like if you don't click that link, you are personally responsible for a disaster.
It's a very familiar, very human response. It is the fight or flight mechanism, but we've sort of hijacked it for civics.
Right. And usually we think that's a good thing. We think urgency equals passion and, passion gets results. But today we are doing something a little different.
A bit of a turn.
Yeah. We're looking at a stack of materials, including this fascinating text titled Measured Voices, Lasting Change, that argues the exact opposite. It argues that this feeling, this breathless, panic-induced urgency, it's actually the enemy of getting things done.
That is the core tension we are exploring today. We're looking at a philosophy called measured advocacy.
Which, to be honest, sounds incredibly boring. Measured advocacy sounds like something you do in a library with, like gloves on.
It definitely isn't flashy.
Yeah.
But the argument here is that legislative success depends on procedure, not prediction. And the really provocative part, the source suggests that many well-meaning advocates are accidentally sabotaging their own causes because they're moving too fast.
Okay, before we get into the strategy, we have to ground this. We aren't just talking about abstract laws here. The source material uses a very specific, very heartbreaking case study, Senate Bill 1700.
Yes.
And for people who aren't glued to Florida legislative tracking, we should probably explain what's at stake here. This bill deals with repealing Florida Statute 768.21, subsection 8.
Correct. And to understand the urgency, you have to understand the statute. This law effectively prevents adult children from suing for pain and suffering if their parent dies due to medical malpractice.
Wow.
And it works the other way, too. Parents can't sue for the pain and suffering of losing an adult child in a medical negligence case.
Which is just devastating. I mean, if you lose your mom to a medical error and you're over 25, the law basically says, sorry, your grief doesn't count for a lawsuit.
Essentially, yes. And because of that severity, the advocacy community has given this statute a very aggressive nickname. They call it the free kill law.
The free kill law. It's punchy. It makes you angry immediately. But here's the first twist in our deep dive.
Okay.
The source material, this guide on how to actually pass the repeal, has a bold instruction right at the top. It says, do not refer to it as the free kill law.
It explicitly warns against it.
That feels so counterintuitive. If you want people to care, don't you want the most emotional, hardest-hitting name possible? Why would you throw away a hashtag like that?
It's the perfect entry point into measured advocacy. Because using the emotional nickname, it feels good to the advocate. It validates their anger. But inside the halls of the legislature, specifically among the staff and the attorneys drafting the bills, that nickname signals a lack of precision. It signals that you are operating on emotion, not on statute.
So by using the viral name, you might actually be getting yourself filtered out of the serious conversation?
Exactly. You're signaling that you are part of the external noise, not the internal solution. And today, we're going to see why boring things, like reading a Senate calendar correctly or using the proper statute number, are actually more revolutionary than a viral campaign.
I'm skeptical, but I'm listening. If being boring is the secret weapon, let's start with the most boring document in the world, the Senate calendar.
The holy grail of legislative anxiety.
In the source material, it describes how advocates just obsess over this document. They treat it like a crystal ball. They're refreshing the page every 5 minutes.
Or a rumor mill.
Yeah.
And the source makes a critical distinction here that I think most people miss. It says advocates view the calendar as a promise of what is going to happen.
Right.
They see a bill appear or not appear, and they start spinning these huge narratives. It's on the agenda, that means it's passing. Or it's not there, it's dead. The chair hates us.
But if it's not on the calendar, isn't that a bad sign? I mean, if I'm inviting people to a party and I don't put a date on the invite, there's no party.
Not necessarily. The text, it defines the Senate calendar as a procedural document and a snapshot.
A snapshot.
It shows what is physically scheduled at that exact moment.
Yeah.
It is not a prediction.
What's the difference?
Think of it like a restaurant menu versus what the chef is actually prepping in the kitchen.
Okay.
The menu shows what you can order right now.
Right.
But just because a special isn't on the menu yet doesn't mean the chef isn't chopping the vegetables for it in the back.
Right.
Negotiations happen offline.
Yeah.
The calendar only reflects the moment the deal is signed and sealed for a hearing.
The source uses the SB 1700 example here. Apparently, there was a moment where advocacy messaging went out claiming this bill was poised for imminent hearings or rapid advancement.
Yeah, I remember this.
People were celebrating or panicking, depending on their side.
Right. But if you looked at the actual document, the calendar, it didn't support those claims at all. It was silent.
So you have advocates telling their thousands of followers, it's happening, and the calendar is just sitting there, blank.
Precisely. And this is where the damage happens. When advocates shout, it's imminent, and then nothing happens on Monday.
Right.
And nothing happens on Tuesday. What happens to the supporters?
They get confused, or they feel like they were lied to.
And think about the legislative staff. Imagine you are a legislative aide. Your job is to know exactly what is happening. Suddenly you get 500 phone calls demanding to know about a hearing that isn't scheduled.
You'd be annoyed.
You'd be furious. And you would look at that advocacy group and think, these people don't know how this building works.
That's a tough look. It's like showing up to a concert a week early and screaming at the security guard that the band is late.
And that brings us to the key takeaway. Advocacy is only effective when it moves at the speed of verifiable facts, not at the speed of frustration.
Not the speed of frustration.
If you're moving faster than the facts, you are just making noise.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here. Even if I get the calendar wrong, doesn't the sheer volume of noise help? I've always been told that politicians need to feel the heat.
Sure.
If we aren't loud, they'll just ignore us.
That leads us right into the myth-busting section of the source. Because there is this pervasive belief that the legislature is this sleeping giant that only wakes up when we scream at it.
Myth number one the source tackles is the one-committee sprint.
Right. The Hollywood version. The bill gets introduced, there's one dramatic hearing, a speech is made, music swells, and it becomes a law.
And the reality is less cinematic.
Much less. Yeah. The source points out that complex policy, especially something like repealing a wrongful death statute, is a grind. It involves multiple stops. And at each stop, there is something called staff analysis.
Which sounds incredibly dry.
It is, but it's where the bill actually lives or dies. Staff analysis is deep technical work. These are professional analysts who look at the bill and ask, how much will this cost? Does this conflict with existing law? What are the unintended consequences?
So while advocates are posting on Facebook about momentum, these analysts are in a windowless room trying to figure out if the math works.
Exactly. And that takes time. So when advocates tell people it's all happening this week, they are setting expectations that the process literally cannot meet.
Which leads to myth number two, which I think is the one I'm most guilty of believing.
Okay.
The uninformed senator. I feel like I assume that unless I send an email, the senator has no idea the issue even exists.
It's the if a tree falls in the forest fallacy. We think if there isn't a public hearing, there's silence. But the source describes an informational network that is always running in the background.
What does that network look like?
Well, it's not just the senator. It's their staff.
Yeah.
And we need to humanize these people for a second.
Yeah.
These are often young, incredibly overworked staffers who are reading briefing binders, meeting with stakeholders, and talking to other offices constantly.
So by the time I send my email, they've probably already had 3 meetings about the topic.
Likely, yes. By the time a bill hits the floor, the senator usually have a briefing binder on it that's an inch thick. They aren't waiting for an email blast to tell them what the topic is.
So the idea that they're just sitting there in the dark until we turn on the advocacy spotlight is just false.
Completely. And this connects to what the source calls the volume fallacy.
The volume fallacy. This contradicts everything I learned in civics class. We're taught that numbers matter. Democracy is a numbers game.
Votes are a numbers game. Persuasion is a credibility game. The source argues that lawmakers are not persuaded by volume alone.
How so?
Think about that overworked staffer again. They open their inbox and see 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
But they are 1,000 form letters. They all have the exact same subject line. They all have the exact same typo in the second paragraph. And they all make a claim that isn't legally accurate, like referring to a hearing that isn't happening.
If I'm that staffer, I'm probably just hitting select all and delete.
Or archive.
Yeah.
You aren't reading them. Now compare that to receiving 5 emails. Just 5. But they are personal. They cite the specific statute correctly. They understand where the bill is in the process, and they make a coherent argument about policy.
Those 5 get read.
Those 5 get printed out and put on the senator's desk. It's about quality over quantity. Lawmakers respond to credibility. If you show you understand the process, they listen. If you just show you can be loud, they tune you out.
And that tuning out,
Oh,
that's the real danger. Because the source talks about the high costs of constant emergency.
Yep.
And this is where we have to talk about the mental health of the people doing the advocating.
It's the boy who cried wolf phenomenon,
Right.
but applied to your own mailing list. The source describes a very real supporter fatigue.
I have felt this. If every email I get from an organization says, this is the decisive moment and history is being made today, and then nothing happens.
Right.
And then next week I get another email saying, no, today is the decisive moment.
Eventually, you stop opening the emails.
I tune out.
And it's not because you stopped caring about the free kill law or whatever the cause is. It's not a lack of passion. It's a reaction to urgency that outpaces process.
Okay.
When you frame every week as the apocalypse or the victory parade, people emotionally exhaust themselves.
So by trying to keep people engaged with hype, you're actually burning them out.
You are. And you're burning something else too.
Yeah.
There's a concept here I want to deep dive into called credibility economics.
I love this metaphor. Explain it.
Think of your credibility with the legislature as a bank account.
Oh.
You start with a zero balance. You accumulate credibility very slowly, penny by penny.
Oh.
You earn it by being right. You earn it by being patient. You earn it by acknowledging when a bill isn't going to pass.
But you spend it quickly.
You spend it in huge chunks.
Give me an example of big spend.
Okay, let's say you blast out an alert saying the senator's blocking our bill, call him now. So your followers flood the phone lines. The senator's office is paralyzed for a day.
Okay.
But it turns out the senator wasn't blocking the bill. He was just waiting for a staff analysis on the budget impact. It was a procedural delay, not a political one.
Oof. So we just yelled at him for doing his job.
Exactly. Touching. You just withdrew a massive amount of credibility. And the next time you call that office, even if you have a legitimate crisis, they remember.
They remember you're the group that sent a mob.
They remember that you sent a mob after them for no reason.
The source notes that legislative offices eventually filter out these voices, even if their arguments are valid, even if the policy is good.
That is the tragedy of it. You could be right on the policy, the law might genuinely need to be repealed, but because you were wrong on the process, nobody is listening to you anymore.
The source also mentions some really aggressive tactics that seem to drain this account instantly. Things like commissioning billboards, attacking legislators personally, or nasty social media campaigns.
The scorched earth approach. And look, I get it. It feels good. If you are angry, putting up a billboard that calls a politician a hypocrite feels like justice.
But does it work?
The text is very clear on this. These tactics close negotiation channels. Bridges burned in one session are rarely rebuilt by the next.
So if you attack a senator personally in 2024, do you think they want to sponsor your bill in 2025?
Probably not. You might win the news cycle for a day, but you lose the war.
This transitions us into probably the hardest part of this conversation, because we're talking about strategy, but we can't ignore the emotion. This whole issue, SB 1700, is driven by grief.
Deeply.
It's driven by people who have lost loved ones, and here is the host playing skeptic again. Shouldn't that grief matter? Shouldn't the fact that people are hurting override the polite procedure?
It is the central tension. And the source handles this delicately but firmly. It says grief is real, but grief alone does not move legislation.
That is a hard, hard pill to swallow.
It is. But it is the reality of the system. The text discusses the tension between, the validity of personal loss and the structured process of coalition building.
Right?
You can have the most heartbreaking story in the world, and the free kill law has thousands of them. But if you don't have the procedural ducks in a row, the bill just won't move.
It's almost like there are two languages being spoken. There's the language of emotion, which is true and valid, and then there is the language of statutes and constitutionality.
And effective advocacy has to speak the second language to serve the first.
Let's look at a specific example of this language barrier. The source brings up constitutional claims surrounding damage caps. This sounds technical, but we need to break it down.
Yeah, let's do it.
Because it's where advocates often trip up.
Right. So, in the world of tort reform, there is often a debate about capping damages, limiting how much money someone can sue for.
And I've seen advocates post things saying, the court's already said you can't do this. Caps are unconstitutional. It's settled law.
They say that with 100% confidence. It's settled law.
Is it?
No. And here is where the legal nuance really matters. The source points out that while statutory caps have been struck down in specific contexts,
Okay.
usually under an equal protection analysis, that doesn't mean the concept is dead forever.
Can we pause on equal protection? What does that actually mean in plain English?
Sure. Think of it as a fairness test. The courts ask, is the law treating two similar victims differently for no good reason? If a law caps damages for a rich person but not a poor person, or a single person versus a married person, the court might say that violates equal protection.
Okay, that makes sense.
But here's the catch. If the legislature rewrites the law to fix that specific unfairness, if they change the definitions of the categories, the court might look at it again and say, okay, now it passes the test.
So saying it's settled is legally incorrect.
It's an oversimplification. The reality is that the broader debate isn't over. Legislatures often revisit policies, they adjust the language, they try to find a way to make it constitutional.
So why does it matter if an advocate gets this wrong? Why can't they just say it's settled as, like, a rhetorical device to scare off the opposition?
Because of who is in the room. When you are speaking to a judiciary committee, you aren't speaking to the general public. You're speaking to lawyers.
Right.
If you stand up at the podium and claim a complex, evolving legal issue is fully resolved in settled law, every attorney in that room, including the senators, knows you haven't done your homework.
You lose the room.
You lose the room immediately. You look uninformed about how judicial review actually works. And suddenly, your credibility account takes another massive hit. They stop listening to your emotional story because you failed the technical test.
It all comes back to that credibility. It seems like the recurring theme here is that precision is powerful.
Precision is persuasion.
So let's try to synthesize all of this.
Yeah.
We've talked about the calendar, the myths, the fatigue, the legal nuances. The overarching philosophy here is measured advocacy. But I want to push back one last time. Does measured just mean passive? Does it mean we just sit around and wait for the senators to decide our fate?
No, and that is the biggest misconception. Measured advocacy is not about silence. It is about urgency guided by understanding.
Okay.
The source isn't saying don't advocate. It's saying don't shout when you should be reading.
It's about timing.
It's about strategic patience. It's realizing that the goal isn't to win a social media argument today. The goal isn't to get the most likes on a post about how corrupt the system is.
Right.
The goal is to achieve lasting reform.
And sometimes lasting reform is boring work.
It's incredibly boring. It's reading the fine print. It's waiting for the committee agenda to actually be posted before sending the email. It's using the correct statute number instead of the viral hashtag.
It's treating the legislature like a professional workplace, not a battlefield.
Exactly. The source suggests that the Senate calendar is a guidepost. It tells us when to mobilize and, crucially, when to prepare quietly.
That idea of preparing quietly is really provocative in our current culture. We live in an attention economy.
Totally.
If you aren't posting, do you even exist?
Right. If I'm not tweeting, am I even fighting?
But this argues that the most radical act might be to just wait, to pause, verify, and listen. Because when you do speak after a period of quiet preparation, your voice carries weight.
Yes.
You aren't just part of the background noise anymore. You are a resource.
That's a powerful shift. Instead of being the person screaming outside the building, you become the person they invite into the office because you actually know what's going on. I think that's a fantastic place to leave it. It challenges us to look at our own advocacy, whether it's for healthcare, education, the environment, and ask, are we building credibility or are we just spending it?
And are we burning out the very people we need to help us cross the finish line?
A huge thank you to the authors of Measured Voices, Lasting Change for this reality check. It's a dense topic, and I know we got into the weeds on Florida law, but the lesson applies everywhere.
Absolutely. Process matters more than prediction.
And to you, listening. Next time you feel that panic, that urge to send the angry email right this second because a graphic told you to, maybe take a breath. Check the actual calendar, read the source text.
Sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to slow down. Thanks for diving in with us.
See you next time.